Hello and welcome to the BigFix Briefing Room. My name is Michelle McGough and I'm here with Mr. Joe Saylor. And now that it's December, we're here to tell you what's new. We'll do the Microsoft Patch Tuesday overview as usual. Then we need to talk about domain controllers because there's some patching you're going to need to be able to do. NIST has released some information about authentication that we really want to pay attention to. And we've got some new BigFix releases coming. Can't wait to tell you about them. Joe, do you want to kick off Microsoft for us?
Yeah. So by the numbers, we've got 71 CVEs this month, not a particularly high number, maybe a little below average. We got one 0-day that has been actively exploited and some particularly nasty criticals come in.
Okay. Another dumpster for, wait, so this is a 6.8 0-day?
Yeah, so I mean, 0-day just describes an exploit that has been announced before a patch was available for it, right? So 0-day doesn't really describe its severity in any way. So this one, as you've noted, it's called a 6.8. We've seen some threatening 6.8s before. This one kind of isn't one of them. It does require an attacker to be local. They have to be logged in as a user, so they have to have already compromised an account and been pretty deep into your network. It does allow them to elevate to local system privileges, which of course carries a fair bit of extra risk, but those are a dime a dozen in Windows. I'm sure you've heard me say this before. There were 800 some odd CVEs that are just like this that were resolved this year, and there will be 800 just like it next year. So they're really just very prolific and not super uncommon. So this one isn't particularly threatening beyond there being active code out there that exploits it.
800 this year? Really?
Total CVEs.
Oh my gosh. I think it might be more next year. If you want to take an offline wager about that.
Yeah, I'm okay with 800 being the over-under. That sounds about right.
There. Well, what's next? Oh, okay. Something a bit more critical.
Yeah, so now we have a real critical. This one is rated at a 9.8, and it has earned every single one of those dots. This is an LDAP remote code execution exploit against domain controllers. So every version of Windows that currently runs a domain controller has an unauthenticated RCE open against it. So these systems are typically pretty open. They are not usually exposed to the internet. If you have them exposed to the internet, maybe calm down on that one. They should definitely not be, but they have to be highly available to your systems. Like that's their whole goal in life, is to be available. And so any attacker inside your network can probably see these, and with this vulnerability can essentially take them over and run anything they want in the context of your LDAP service account. So pretty scary rights and not terribly difficult to exploit.
Sounds like a priority. All right.
Yeah, if you have any room in your process to move patching up for anything for any reason, now is the time to use it on these domain controllers. Like get them patched ASAP.
Okay, thanks, Joe. What's next? Oh, hold on. Oh, use after free. So this is Microsoft though. I think I've only ever seen us talk about use after free with Linux kernel.
Yeah, that's right. That's very common in the Linux kernel space. You see the use after free all the time. Usually I kind of describe these as a local code execution. So it's like a way for an attacker to use currently active memory to run arbitrary code. But it's all generally local. In this case, we're calling it a remote code execution because this is against the remote desktop gateway service. So only on servers. This isn't a vulnerability that will be available on all of your endpoints, like all of your user endpoints. But it does allow an attacker to run whatever they want against your remote desktop gateways.
So I think Linux admins are probably pretty familiar with how that can be leveraged, but I think you were going to break down. Can you break it down how this works?
Yeah, right. So it's based on memory access. So it's a quirk in how some programming languages handle memory. In this case, it's probably C++ is kind of the most common way. But in those languages, the programmer has to manage what happens to memory and when things are cleared out and when things are being used in memory. And the vulnerability comes when a the application says, "Hey, in memory space one, I need to run this legitimate remote desktop piece of code." It's the very first thing that happens. And then after that, we have to clean up the memory. So now we've deleted out of that memory space the legitimate remote desktop code, but it's empty. And the sneaky part is we have left the pointer running that says, "Hey, run memory space one." So the pointer just stays there. It's still running. It's
Okay.
saying, "Hey, run anything in one." And so now that we have this void, we have this vacuum in memory, that's when an attacker can insert just something into that memory that's not currently in use, and the application is still trying to run that memory space, so it'll run whatever the heck the attacker has inserted. And that's use after free.
Yeah, thanks for breaking that down. So, and this one, it's an 8.1 or 8.1 high. It's high. It's moderately high. And to your point, this is only on the gateways.
Yeah, so only on the server, and the only reason it's kind of as low as it is that any use after free like this that is network based, so the attacker would have to come in through the network, requires that that attacker win a race condition as well. So this whole process here that I've kind of outlined runs within half a second, like a very, very small period of time when this RAM is open and still has the pointer pointed at it and not cleaned up. So the attacker has to manage to insert whatever they want through some
Yeah.
crafted TCP packet in this very narrow window, and it has to be. Obviously, they can't time it, so they'll just be flooding attacks in, but they have to win that condition in that very brief period of time where it's vulnerable. And so that's why even though the penalty for having this exploited is very high, it's harder than maybe it looks to exploit.
Okay. Thanks for breaking that down. All right. Sandbox escape. And we saw a ton of these this year.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really been the virtual machine hell week or hell year, something like
year.
that. Not quite decade yet, but just the year hasn't been a great year for virtualization technologies. Yeah, so in this case, Hyper-V has a vulnerability where a locally exploited machine, so if an attacker, gets admin privileges on one local sandboxed virtual machine, they can send commands up through the hypervisor, and so then thereby exploit other and compromise other machines on that same hypervisor.
Yuck. But
Yeah,
okay.
always yuck. It really circumvents what we think of as security, right? Because anytime I have a sandbox system, I think other boxes, that are in separate sandboxes are safe, and this kind of breaks those walls down.
Yeah, it does. All right. Well, what's next? Oh, we're going to do the stories of the month. I'm curious to see what you have selected.
Yeah, so definitely done with the Microsoft vulnerabilities so far. The most interesting thing that has happened, at least in the last few days here, is that NIST has uh, published a guideline, like a brand new, like pretty bold set of guidelines for managing authentication. I'm really happy to see this because they've made some again very bold statements about what password security looks like going forward into the future. One particular thing I'm kind of excited about here is that they've like very strongly recommended the use of passphrases over like complex individual characters. So in the case of today, like a password policy typically looks like 8 to 12 characters. You got to use a capital letter, you got to use a number, and you got to use a special character, right?
Hmm.
But that's people are really good at minimizing rules like that. And what we found that looks like is, you have a capital letter at the beginning of your password. Just humans in general do this, like
Yeah.
everybody. I'm not calling you
Right.
out, Michelle. I
No,
might be
no,
calling
no,
me
no.
out, but
But
I'm not calling you out.
I think I saw a stand-up comedian actually talking about how just predictable humans are when it comes to passwords. It's a comedian, not even a tech guy. It was just a guy that was resetting his password and noticed he was doing the same thing every time, right? The X, oh, I need a special character. Well, I need a number. Oh, that's a one. I need a special character too. Well, I'll just use that exclamation point. And, you know,
Yeah, so I mean, it's exactly it, right? It turns out that we have all these rules that seem like they increase the complexity of the password, but it's really capital
right,
letter at the beginning, symbol at the end, number before the end, and maybe you replace an E with a three. Like that's
right, right.
password complexity, right?
Sweet,
And
sweet.
so it has the opposite of the intended effect because now rather than having 95 possible characters for our first letter, it's always a capital letter, so there's 26. There's not 95. Um, and so it really collapses the possibilities. It doesn't actually make them, it doesn't increase your cryptographic space. Whereas when you increase the length of the password, and fun fact here, if you have an 8 character password that has all these special character requirements and you're the full 90 some odd character space for each character, you only need one extra character to make just capital letters more complicated. So a 9 character alpha password has more possible combinations than an 8 character one with all these requirements.
Oh, right, right.
So
Yeah.
enter the idea of the passphrase rather than the password. This has been something we've known for a long time is like much harder to break because it's easier to remember. Users don't have to like write it down. You just string together a bunch of words that like aren't necessarily even a sentence, just a bunch of words, and they're so much longer and they're so much harder to crack because of being 30, 40 characters long and still easy to remember and kind of easy to type in. So that's the requirement, or sorry, that's the recommendation from NIST as we move to these passphrases. And I'm really excited that someone has really come out and said that because, again, we've known for a long time that the science says this is better, but nobody's really taken the leap to go to this stuff.
I'm curious about what that leap is going to look like in practice because transitioning to it will mean changing all of the requirements in the technologies that require passwords, right? Like they're all going to have to now accept passwords that don't necessarily have a special character or a number. And the other thing is in the NIST framework, usually that takes a while for organizations to implement. So when they get to this version of the NIST framework, it might be a year from now or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be a really fast transition, given how long everybody's been talking about passphrases. I'm curious what your thoughts are on any of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think enabling people to even use passphrases is step number one. Vast majority of my passwords have a maximum character limit that's like way too low to make a passphrase interesting, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
the maximum character limit, I think, if we're looking for systemic change, let's get rid of that first. Like make your maximum character limit as a policy 100 characters. Just give people room to do as many characters as they like. One effect of having, your 8 or 12 character minimums is that people will make passwords to those minimums, and that makes them even easier to guess, right? Because they have exactly 8 or exactly 12. Um, Having that variable character limit, it just increases your cryptographic security even more because now an attacker has to pick the number of characters as well as the characters themselves.
It's a lot, but it is progress. It's a step forward, and I'm happy to see it too. This is great.
Yeah. Some of the other big pullouts that I found from reading through this document is they, of course, strongly recommend multi-factor authentication as a requirement, not just a recommendation. Like that's where real security comes from. We've seen time and time again that passwords are not like one layer of security just doesn't do it anymore. We need hardware-based multi-factor auth everywhere. So that's another big one I pulled out of there. They also do not like password recovery hints. We have
Mhm.
seen time and again that like attackers just as people are great at trawling Facebook and Instagram for your like the name of your dog or the name of the street you grew up on or whatever you might have used as a password hint. And AI is just making that even easier to troll through the internet and find whatever you might have posted. So don't even use password recovery hints. It should be something. Password recovery should be something hardware based, like more again, just tie it back to multi-factor. That was another big recommendation from NIST here. And then the other thing that's going to be super controversial is that they do not like fast password rotation intervals. And I kind of I'm not sure I read this correctly, but I think they are recommending no password reset interval, which seems like a little too much to me.
Yeah, it
But
does seem more relaxed.
maybe a 30-day reset interval is no good. Like you're just making people write their passwords down more, right? And that's that, not ideal. Doesn't make your users happy, and makes them less likely to have something just in their brain and not elsewhere, like on a notepad or something like that.
Well, the impression I get from the folks at NIST is that they do care about cybersecurity, but they're also aware of the productivity impact, and they don't try to make these recommendations so difficult that you can't operate, within them. But I wonder if password rotations also open up opportunities to be exploited, more often, and if statistically there's some kind of sweet spot between something short like 30 days and something long like infinite or, a year even.
Yeah, more
So,
nuanced approach for
okay.
sure. Yeah, seems like the way to go.
Agree.
All right, and of course, there were many more recommendations in this document. I would totally encourage everyone to go take a look at it. It is dry as heck to read. It is in like technical government speak for sure. So, take it in small bites.
Consider us advised, Joe. And we will be adopting the framework as part of our currency. So, when it's time, you'll see those enhancements in our compliance module. All right, QR codes used to bypass browser isolation. I was reading on this a little bit and then I got pulled away for a customer call and didn't finish the article. And so where I was left was trying to understand what is the image streaming technique of browser isolation and what does that have to do with an exploit?
Yeah, so first I got to apologize for this image. It is absolute garbage. I literally pulled it straight out of the Pacific garbage patch. Like it is. I
Okay, that's
tried.
not
I
that
tried to
bad.
make it. I tried to make it work, and it is what it is. So browser isolation is a technique where your browser on your local machine doesn't really do any of the processing. You send your request up to whatever the website is that you're trying to get to. That website then sends it to a virtualized sandbox browser out in the cloud, and that sandbox browser, that cloud machine, does all the processing of whatever the HTML response is and whatever code needs to run to make that web page work. And
Okay.
then that cloud browser just turns it into an image. It just sends you a JPEG of whatever it rendered. And that's the only thing that touches your local browser on your local machine. So we don't have like no code can run on your machine because it's just an image. That's all you see.
Okay.
So the thing the researchers came up with here is, well, we can't send any code to your box, right? It's because we don't have HTML, we don't have anything like that to show to your browser to run any exploits. Uh, but hey, what can we do? We can use QR codes. QR codes are just images. And so they send, as a part of the payload in the website, in the image, they send you a QR code and it has instructions for whatever nefarious junk they want to do. So,
Where was this being used? Oh my
well,
gosh.
so it's not. This is more of
Okay.
a
Just
an
research or it's
exercise.
a proof of
Yeah,
concept.
this is more of a really interesting exercise in lateral thinking to me because,
Yeah.
attackers are thinking of stuff like this, right? We think that a virtualized browser using browser isolation is impervious to assault because it's just an image. Well, there are jerks out there that are thinking in this way, like how can I use an image to assault your system? And so it's important to understand that, that like lateral stuff like this is happening.
Yeah.
Now, the way the researchers actually exploited this was by a pre-infected system, because you have to have something use the QR code, right?
Oh, sure.
Which is like, if your system's already infected, why even go through the trouble of using this browser isolation method to get a link down, right? You could do whatever you wanted. But it is still very interesting, right? So that means that a man in the middle could send you a malicious QR code, right, through browser isolation, and then you would have to like whip your phone out and actually click it. So I'm not sure who's exactly going to do that, but I think there's space there for that to be effective.
Wow. Well, this is it's cool to your point of lateral thinking. It's interesting that they came up with that, but yeah, it's kind of
Not
weak.
terribly threatening, yeah.
Yeah.
But just this really says to me that um, for the longest time we thought that shortened URLs were just fine. Like five,
Hmm.
10 years ago, I had coworkers in the security space that thought tiny URL was just fine. You just click it, whatever. It's you can't see the where it's going, but it's fine. And I think we're rapidly approaching the place where we're realizing that we've realized that shortened URLs can be dangerous, and now we're about to realize that QR codes can be just as dangerous, right? Because they're just obfuscated links, and this is a part of that evolution.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've had some fun novel attacks lately, and that one was not as fun as Rambo shooting ram cards.
I do love
That
Rambo.
was pretty good. That was pretty good. It's, yeah, text between Android and iOS devices have been owned. There's, I don't even know what to say other than, there's no solution for this, Joe, right now. Like, I don't think Android or iOS have any APIs. I mean, I looked yesterday. I don't think there are any APIs that allow some kind of policy-based prevention of that type of contact. And, as just individuals on our personal devices, what are you going to do? You can block text from an annoying person, but you can't outright block them by policy, you know? So
Yeah,
this is tough. Like, do you want to talk more about what's going on here?
yeah. So for we've just learned that for months there have been state-sponsored actors that have compromised at least AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen, and have had access to all of their unencrypted messages on any of those networks uh, for months that we know of, right? Like that's just as
Right.
far back as the logs
Right.
go. And obviously, the recommendation from CISA, from the government, is to use end-to-end encryption message applications for any of your communications. That would be like your WhatsApps, your Telegrams, your Signals, anything with end-to-end encryption. Kind of circumvents this problem. For me, it's more of a reminder that like all communications, especially when you're just kind of casually texting, they can be compromised to no fault of your own, right? And so for me, it's just a good reminder to be hygienic about the messages I send.
Yeah.
Try not to send anything too sensitive or anything too incriminating. I don't do that too frequently, but occasionally. Uh, yeah, I mean
Well, we
that's really my takeaway here.
and honestly, even just something that we can do is, we've been engaged with BigFix for really, a lot of years, and we have a lot of customers who know us. We have all these, staff here that know us. I get texts from customers and I get texts from other employees, and it's outside of the that type of information is outside of the enterprise, right? It isn't managed really. And so as individuals that, we're responsible for the security of the data that that crosses our paths, whether it's personal or private. We don't want to share it. And so that's even something for us and for our customers. We shouldn't be, you know, trading anything sensitive in those messages. I mean, we still need it, you know. I mean, we still need to sometimes reach out to someone that doesn't have access to email, but we don't want to share anything
Yeah, it
sensitive.
turns out those really restricted policies that say you can only use company email for any communications, they actually do mean something, and that would prevent this kind of data escape in the
Yes.
text realm.
Yes, I agree. Well, so there's no solution other than being vigilant to the best of our ability. So, with that in mind, is there anything good to talk about? Yes, thank goodness. New
Yeah, so
releases.
that's the end of our fun exploits for
Hmm.
the month. For new releases, even though we're nearing the holiday week and things are winding down, we have all sorts of new stuff coming out. We have our GA for BigFix Reports, which I'm really excited about. That is essentially a new front end on top of web reports. So that's a nice visual upgrade for web reports with a couple of new functionalities in there. My favorite being dark mode. I love dark mode. I hate that I'm staring at a white screen right now. My eyes are burning. Uh, but yeah, so dark mode in reports, it all looks very modern, looks much nicer than it did before. So give it a try when that comes out. Should be maybe out by the time this is up, and if not, within a few days.
That's exciting. Yeah, and then we've got insights, inventory, and server automation and stuff coming too. So very exciting. And to Joe's point, it probably will be out before the video is posted. So go and look for it if you haven't seen it already. And other than that, I mean, what a year. We'll, we'll be back again to do it in January. So if you're still here with us, we really appreciate you. We wish you a great holiday season and a beautiful new year. Thanks, Joe.